I tore up $1 million check after my son lied about his wedding date, leaving me alone in an empty restaurant. While he celebrated with everyone but me, I uncovered his betrayal, a deliberate plan to erase his father from his memory. And now he faces the consequences. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. I straightened my bow tie one final time before stepping through the mahogany doors of the Grand Pavilion, 6:00 sharp, just as David had specified. The weight of the gift box in my left hand reminded me of what lay inside, a check that would secure my son's future. White roses trembled slightly in my other hand as I anticipated his reaction. The silence hit me first. Crystal chandeliers cast their usual warm glow across empty tables draped in pristine white cloth. Through Florida-ceiling windows, Central Park stretched in golden spring light, but not a single guest occupied the dining room's elegant chairs. No flower arrangements, no wedding arch, no celebration at all. My patent leather shoes echoed against marble floors as I walked deeper into the space, checking each section methodically. Perhaps they'd moved the ceremony to the private dining room, but that too stood vacant, chairs pushed neatly under tables like soldiers at attention. "Excuse me." I approached the mater station where a young man in black uniform polished wine glasses. "I'm looking for the Harris wedding reception." He paused mid-polish, setting the glass down carefully. "I'm sorry, sir, but we have no events scheduled tonight." "That's impossible." My voice came out sharper than intended. "My son, David Harris, booked this venue months ago. The wedding ceremony was supposed to conclude at 5:30, reception at 6:00. The young man's expression shifted to professional concern. "Let me fetch our manager, sir." James Morrison appeared within minutes, a man I dealt with personally when booking corporate dinners. His face showed genuine confusion as he reviewed something on his tablet. "Mr. Harris, I apologize, but our event calendar shows no weddings today." "Are you certain about the date?" I pulled the heavy invitation from my inside jacket pocket, unfolding the cream paper with embossed gold lettering. Every detail appeared exactly as I remembered. "Saturday, April 26, 2025, 6:00 in the evening. The Grand Pavilion, Manhattan." "Everything's correct," I said, holding the invitation toward him. "David told me 6:00 sharp." Morrison studied the invitation, his forehead creasing. "This is quite puzzling, Mr. Harris." Perhaps there was a venue change or a scheduling error. The gift box suddenly felt heavier in my grip. I'd never been late to anything important in my 68 years. Linda used to joke that I arrived early for my own birth. David knew this about me. He'd always known. "Could you double-check your system?" My throat felt dry despite the restaurant's perfect climate control. Morrison nodded, disappearing behind the host station. I stood there in my formal attire, surrounded by empty elegance, while Manhattan's Saturday evening hummed beyond the windows. Other families were probably gathering around dinner tables right now, sharing stories and laughter. Morrison returned, shaking his head slowly. "I've checked everything twice, sir. No Harris events scheduled for today, yesterday, or tomorrow." I folded the invitation back into my pocket, my hand steadier than I felt inside. Something was very wrong, and I intended to find out exactly what. The restaurant's warmth followed me onto Fifth Avenue, but spring's coolness helped clear my head. I needed privacy for this conversation. Whatever had gone wrong, it was family business. My fingers trembled slightly as I scrolled through contacts to find David's number. The gift box sat on my car's passenger seat through the window. White roses scattered across black leather. Everything I'd prepared for this moment waiting unused. The phone rang 3 times before his voice came through, casual and distracted. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" "David, where are you?" "I'm standing outside the Grand Pavilion and there's absolutely nobody here." I paced the narrow space between parked cars, formal shoes clicking against asphalt. Oh, a pause, then incredibly. "The wedding was yesterday, Dad. Sorry you missed it." I stopped walking. "What do you mean yesterday?" "Friday night. Beautiful ceremony." "Really?" Emily looked amazing. His tone carried no urgency, no concern that his father had apparently missed his only son's wedding. How can it be yesterday? My voice rose despite my efforts at control. I have the invitation right here. Saturday, April 26th. Listen, I don't know what happened with the invitations. Maybe a printing error. These things happen with wedding vendors. A printing error. 40 years in business had taught me to recognize lies, and my son had just told me a spectacular one. David, don't hang up. Explain this to me right now. Dad, I'm actually in the middle of something here. Can I call you back later tonight or maybe tomorrow? The casualness in his voice cut deeper than anger could have. This wasn't panic about a missed invitation or guilt over a genuine mistake. This was dismissal. 500 people received correct invitations for yesterday, but mine alone had the wrong date. Look, it's complicated. Wedding planning is stressful. Things get mixed up. Nothing gets mixed up when it matters. David, you know that about me. Silence stretched between us, filled only by Manhattan traffic and my own controlled breathing. Through the restaurant's windows, I could see Morrison still standing at his station, probably wondering about the confused old man in the tuxedo. Dad, I really need to go. Emily's family is here, and Emily's family knew the correct date. Another pause. When David spoke again, his voice had hardened slightly. I don't know what you want me to say. The wedding happened. It was perfect. I'm sorry there was confusion with your invitation. Confusion. I repeated the word carefully, tasting its insufficiency. I'll call you tomorrow. Okay, we'll figure this out then. The line went dead. I stood on the sidewalk, phone still pressed to my ear, watching normal people walk past with their normal Saturday evening plans. A jogger rounded the corner. A couple shared takeout bags. Life continued around me while mine had just shifted fundamentally. I got into my car and sat for several minutes before starting the engine, processing what David's voice had revealed. Not confusion, not accident, deliberate deception. The drive to my apartment took 20 minutes through Manhattan's evening traffic. I used the time to think, my formal jacket draped across the back seat, bow tie loosened around my collar. By the time I reached the Upper East Side, my initial shock had crystallized into something colder and more productive. Inside my study, family photographs lined mahogany shelves. Linda and me at various corporate events. David's graduation from Columbia. Holidays when he still seemed proud to be my son. I pulled out my phone, realizing I needed evidence of what David had told me. Finding Emily's Instagram account took several attempts. Technology had never been my strong suit, but there they were, dozens of photographs from yesterday's celebration. The grand pavilion dining room I just left empty, filled with flowers and laughter. Emily in an ivory gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. David in his tuxedo beaming beside the wedding cake I'd helped pay for. I scrolled through faces I recognized. Tom Brewster from the Chamber of Commerce. Sarah Whitfield from the country club. My own lawyer, Marcus Drummond, raising a champagne toast. Every single person in those photographs had received the correct date for my son's wedding. Every person except his father. The gift box sat where I had placed it on my desk, ribbons slightly crushed from the evening's events. I unwrapped it slowly, revealing the leather portfolio containing my wedding present. A cashier's check for $1 million. David's startup capital, his freedom from the student loans that still burdened his generation, his ticket to independence. Independence. That was what this was really about. I held the check up to the desk lamp's light, examining the careful calligraphy of the amount. $1,100,000. Money I'd earned building Harris Properties from nothing, growing it into Manhattan's most respected real estate firm. Money David had always expected but never quite appreciated. The phone buzzed with a text message. Sorry about the confusion tonight, Dad. Let's grab lunch next week and catch up. OD catch up. As if his wedding was equivalent to missing a baseball game. I walked to the window overlooking Central Park, where families were finishing their Saturday evening activities. Children played on distant playgrounds while parents watched protectively. Some of those parents had probably attended David's wedding yesterday, maybe wondering where the groom's father had gone. The answer was simple. David was ashamed of me. My rough edges, my direct manner, my old-school approach to business, none of it fit the polished image he'd cultivated for his media agency. His clients preferred the sanitized version of success, not the man who had actually built it from construction sites and late-night negotiations. I returned to my desk and set the check down carefully. $1 million represented months of careful financial planning, the liquidation of certain investments, the deliberate structuring of what I had intended as the most generous wedding gift a father could give. David had wanted my money, but not my presence. The photographs on my shelves seemed different now. Not memories of a proud father and son, but documentation of a relationship that had apparently ended without my knowledge. Linda's absence felt heavier in the silence. She would have known how to handle this, would have found a way to bridge whatever gap had grown between David and me. But Linda was gone, and I was alone with the truth my son had worked so carefully to avoid telling me directly. I picked up the check one final time, studying my own signature authorizing the funds. If David wanted to pretend his father didn't exist, perhaps it was time to show him what that actually meant. The decision settled over me like a familiar coat, comfortable, necessary, and perfectly fitted to the man I'd always been. Back in my study, I placed the check on my desk bladder and stared at it for a long moment. $1 million, the same amount Linda and I had saved for David's future when he was still young enough to hug his father without embarrassment. I walked to the kitchen and selected a bottle of Macallan, 25, Linda's last Christmas gift to me. The crystal tumbler caught the desk lamp's light as I poured 2 fingers of scotch and returned to my chair. "To new beginnings," I said aloud to Linda's photograph on the bookshelf. Her smile remained unchanged, captured at David's high school graduation, when we'd both been so proud of our accomplished son. I picked up the check again. The paper felt substantial between my fingers. Bank-grade stock that represented 40 years of building something meaningful. David had expected this money, counted on it probably. His casual dismissal on the phone suggested he believed he'd weather any temporary displeasure from his father. That was his first mistake. I tore the check slowly, deliberately, starting from one corner and working across. The sound was surprisingly satisfying, a crisp snap that echoed in the quiet room. I continued until the pieces were too small to reconstruct, then gathered them into the original envelope. The scotch burned slightly as I drank, but it sharpened my focus rather than dulling it. I pulled out the photo albums Linda had meticulously maintained, finding pictures of David as a child. There he was at 8 years old, wearing my old construction helmet at a building site. At 12, helping me review blueprints in this same study. At 16, telling his friends how his father built Manhattan. When had that pride turned to shame? I closed the album and moved to my filing cabinet, retrieving the folder labeled David Business Records. As his father and financial mentor, I'd helped establish his agency, guaranteed his initial loans, provided business connections that formed his client base. Everything I'd done to launch his career had been done with love and pride. Now those same records would serve a different purpose. My laptop hummed to life as I began downloading financial documents I'd previously ignored. Bank statements, tax filings, client contracts, all the paperwork David had asked me to review when I had time. I had trusted him completely, never questioning his business practices or examining details too closely. Trust, another mistake I wouldn't repeat. The evening stretched ahead of me, and for the first time since receiving that wedding invitation, I felt completely clear about what needed to happen next. David had made his choice about our relationship when he decided I wasn't suitable for his important day. Tomorrow, I would begin making choices about his. My alarm hadn't been necessary. I'd been awake since 5, sitting at my kitchen table with coffee and a legal pad, organizing questions that needed answers. By 9:30, I was dressed and driving toward my Wall Street office through Manhattan's quiet Sunday streets. The Harris Properties building stood empty except for weekend security. I nodded to Miguel at the front desk and took the elevator to my private floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered an unobstructed view of the financial district. I started with my Rolodex, an old-fashioned tool that had served me well through decades of deals. John Weimer answered on the second ring, his voice cautious when he realized who was calling. "John, I need to ask you something confidential." "Did you attend my son's wedding yesterday?" "Rob." The pause stretched uncomfortably. "I thought you knew about the change." "What change?" "David mentioned you were dealing with health issues and couldn't attend. Something about doctor's orders." I set down my pen carefully. "I've never felt better in my life." "Christ, Rob." He said the family thought it would be better to keep things small this time, more intimate without the older generation there. The older generation. Translation: without me. I thanked John and immediately dialed Sarah Mitchell, who'd catered several Harris Properties events. Her voice brightened when she recognized mine, then faltered as my questions continued. "Beautiful ceremony," she confirmed. "David specifically requested elegant but exclusive. He mentioned wanting to protect family privacy." "How many guests?" "About 200. Lovely crowd, very sophisticated. 200 people at an intimate ceremony that somehow excluded the groom's father." I made notes in my journal, tracking each conversation, building a picture of systematic deception. Marcus Drummond, my own attorney, had the decency to sound guilty. David approached me directly. "Rob said there were family complications and asked if I could attend as a family friend rather than your representative." "What exactly did he tell you about these complications?" "That you'd had disagreements about the wedding style. That Emily's family preferred a more contemporary approach. Contemporary code for embarrassed by the old man's traditional values." By noon, I'd spoken with 8 people who had attended my son's wedding. Each had received a different explanation for my absence, but the pattern was clear. David had spent weeks crafting stories to exclude me while preserving his relationships with my business connections. The final call went to Robert Chen, whose architectural firm had designed David's agency offices. "Robert, did David seem stressed about family issues at the wedding?" "Actually, no. He seemed relieved, if anything, like a weight had been lifted." Emily looked radiant, too. "They both seemed very happy with how everything turned out. Relieved." My absence had relieved my son. I sat back in my leather chair, surrounded by the awards and photographs that documented my business career. 40 years of building relationships, creating opportunities, establishing the foundation that had made David's success possible. He'd used those connections to celebrate without me, convincing my own associates that I was the problem. The afternoon sun shifted across my desk as I opened my laptop and began a different kind of investigation. David's business operated in a world of contracts and invoices, tax filings and financial reports. Everything left traces. It was time to follow those traces and discover exactly what my son had been hiding. Monday morning brought purpose. I arrived at the office early and spent an hour preparing before my advisors arrived. By 2:00, Michael Rodriguez and Sam Lebin sat across from my conference table, surrounded by documents I'd gathered throughout the weekend. "Gentlemen, I need a comprehensive review of my family's business arrangements." I kept my voice neutral, professional. "Consider this a standard audit." Michael opened David's financial files first, his accountant's eyes scanning columns of numbers with practiced efficiency. After 20 minutes, he looked up with concern. "Mr. Harris, these figures don't align with standard business practices. Income reporting shows significant inconsistencies." "Show me." He spread 3 years of tax returns across the mahogany surface, pointing to specific entries. "Here, David reported $340,000 in agency income for 2024, but these bank statements show deposits totaling over $900,000. Where's the difference going? That's what concerns me." There are multiple transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, shell corporations with minimal documentation. Sam leaned forward, adjusting his glasses as he examined the paperwork. "This pattern suggests deliberate tax evasion, Robert, not simple bookkeeping errors. I maintained careful composure, though my pulse had quickened. What would happen if these discrepancies were discovered by authorities? The IRS would launch an immediate investigation, Sam explained. With amounts this substantial, we're looking at potential criminal charges, prison time. Michael nodded grimly. The offshore component makes it worse. Federal prosecutors treat hidden foreign accounts very seriously. I photographed each document methodically with my phone, creating a comprehensive digital record. David's agency had flourished using my business connections, but apparently my son had decided those same relationships weren't worth maintaining legally. There's more, Michael continued, pulling out client contracts. Several agreements show cash payments without proper documentation. That's money laundering territory if the amounts are significant enough. How significant are we talking based on these records? Potentially over $2 million in unreported income across 3 years. The irony struck me forcefully. I'd offered David $1 million as a wedding gift. Honest money earned through legitimate business. He'd apparently been hiding twice that amount through illegal schemes. Sam gathered the papers into neat stacks. Robert, I have to ask, are you considering reporting this to us authorities? I stood and walked to the window, looking down at Wall Street's afternoon activity. Traders and analysts hurried between buildings, conducting business within legal boundaries because they understood consequences. I'm considering many things, Sam. For now, I just need to understand what my son has been doing with the advantages I provided him. Michael and Sam exchanged glances. They had worked with me long enough to recognize my tone when I was planning something significant. We'll prepare a complete analysis, Michael offered. Every transaction documented, every irregularity highlighted. Do that, and gentlemen. I turned back to face them. This conversation remains confidential until I decide otherwise. They nodded and began packing their materials. After they left, I sat alone with the evidence spread before me, understanding that David had handed me something more valuable than hurt feelings. Tuesday morning, I called David's office and spoke to his assistant with perfect calm. Please tell David his father would like to discuss our misunderstanding over dinner tonight, 7:30, at Bella in the Village. I chose the restaurant deliberately, the same place where I had taken him for birthday dinners when he was young enough to order chicken fingers without shame. The irony felt appropriate. David arrived 15 minutes late, scanning the intimate dining room nervously before spotting me in the corner booth. His suit was expensive but wrinkled, his tie slightly askew. The confident son from the Instagram photos had been replaced by someone who looked like he hadn't slept well. Dad. He slid into the seat across from me, attempting a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Thanks for calling. I've been hoping we could talk, have you? I signaled the waiter and ordered a bottle of Barolo, David's favorite wine from our previous dinners here. I thought you might be too busy with honeymoon plans. About the wedding, there were complications with the venue scheduling. Emily's family had strong preferences about timing. Stop. I kept my voice level almost gentle. We both know better than that. The wine arrived, providing a momentary distraction as our waiter performed the tasting ritual. David's hands trembled slightly as he picked up his glass, and I noticed he didn't actually drink from it. I brought you something, I continued, retrieving the envelope from my jacket pocket. A wedding present. His face brightened with relief and greed. Dad, you didn't need to. I opened the envelope carefully and emptied its contents onto the white tablecloth between us. Dozens of paper fragments scattered like confetti across the surface, some pieces small enough to flutter in the restaurant's air conditioning. David stared at the debris, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition to horror as he realized what he was seeing. This was your wedding gift, I explained quietly. A cashier's check for $1 million. I destroyed it Saturday night. You're insane. The words came out strangled barely above a whisper. That money I needed. You needed many things, David. My respect, my trust, my presence at your wedding. I leaned back against the leather banquet, completely relaxed while he struggled to process what he'd lost. Instead, you chose embarrassment. He lunged forward, trying to gather the pieces with both hands. This is fixable. Banks can reissue. I calmly moved the envelope beyond his reach. No, they can't. I specifically requested non-replaceable status. You destroyed $1 million out of spite. I destroyed the illusion that you deserve what you never earned. I finished my wine while he sat frozen, fragments of his inheritance still clinging to his fingers. Starting tomorrow, David, you'll discover what independence actually costs. You'll regret this, old man. I don't need your money anymore. We'll see about that. He stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. Other diners turned to watch as he stormed toward the exit, leaving me alone with the scattered remains of his future. I signaled for the check and waited patiently, already anticipating tomorrow's phone calls. Wednesday morning found me in my office by 7, 2 hours before my secretary typically arrived. I used the quiet time to organize paperwork and prepare for what would be the most important business day of my week. Judith Green appeared at 9 sharp, coffee in hand and already reviewing my calendar. "Good morning, Mr. Harris. Your appointment with First National is confirmed for 10:00. Perfect. And Judith, I'll be unavailable for all calls from David Harris indefinitely. Refer him to my voicemail." Her eyebrows rose slightly, but she simply nodded. 40 years of working together had taught her not to question my business decisions. Peter Adams welcomed me into the bank's executive conference room at precisely 10:00. We'd done business together since the 80s, when I was still borrowing money to buy my first properties instead of depositing millions from their sale. "Peter, I'm here to revoke all personal guarantees on Harris Media Solutions accounts." I slid the paperwork across the polished table, documents my lawyer, Sam Levin, had prepared overnight. Peter examined the forms carefully. "Robert, this represents a $2 million credit facility. Your son's business depends on this line. I'm aware of the implications. This could force his agency into bankruptcy within weeks. Are you certain about this decision?" "Completely certain." I signed the documents while Peter watched, his expression troubled but professional. "How quickly can you implement the revocation?" "We'll notify Harris Media by noon today. The credit freeze will be effective immediately." I stood and shook his hand. "Thank you, Peter. This is strictly business, nothing personal." Back at my office, Judith intercepted me before I reached my suite. "Mr. Harris, David has called 6 times since you left. He sounds quite agitated." "I'll bet he does." "What did you tell him?" "That you're in meetings through the end of the week as instructed." My phone began ringing as we spoke. Judith glanced at the display and shook her head. "That's him again. Let it go to voicemail." I spent the afternoon reviewing real estate portfolios, conducting normal business while David's world imploded 20 blocks south. Each call from his number went unanswered. Each voicemail remained unheard. By 5:00, Judith reported 19 attempted contacts. The last message was quite heated. She mentioned diplomatically, "Should I transcribe it?" "No need. I can imagine the content." As Manhattan's business day wound down around us, I walked to my window and looked out at the financial district. Somewhere in that maze of glass and steel, my son was probably discovering that independence carried a price tag he couldn't afford. Tomorrow would bring the next phase of his education. The federal building security checkpoint took longer than expected Thursday morning. Metal detectors, X-ray machines, and guards who treated every visitor like a potential threat. I carried only my briefcase and identification, but the inspection process still consumed 15 minutes. Inspector Mark Thompson's office occupied the 15th floor, overlooking the East River through reinforced windows. Government-issued furniture and fluorescent lighting created an atmosphere of institutional authority that perfectly suited my purposes. "Mr. Harris, your call yesterday mentioned tax irregularities." Thompson gestured to the chair across from his metal desk, where a stack of blank forms waited. "I have documented evidence of systematic tax evasion." I opened my briefcase and began arranging documents in chronological order, creating a timeline of David's financial crimes. These records span 3 years of deliberate fraud. Thompson examined the bank statements first. his trained eye immediately catching the discrepancies Michael had identified. These deposit amounts don't match the reported business income. Not even close. My son has been routing money through Cayman Islands corporations, avoiding approximately 60% of his tax obligations. You understand you're reporting your own family member. I'm reporting criminal activity that happens to involve a family member. I maintained eye contact, letting him see my resolve. Personal relationships don't excuse fraud. Thompson spent 40 minutes reviewing every document, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. The evidence Michael and Sam had helped me organize told a clear story of deliberate deception, false business expenses, hidden client payments, and offshore accounts designed to conceal income. "This is substantial," he finally said. "We'll begin immediate investigation procedures. What's your timeline for cases this well documented?" "We'll have agents at Harris Media Solutions by Monday morning. Bank records will be subpoenaed, accounts frozen pending investigation." I signed the formal complaint and provided my contact information as a cooperating witness. The paperwork felt oddly satisfying. Each signature represented another step away from the father David had rejected. "Mr. Harris, investigations like this typically take months to resolve. Are you prepared for that duration?" "Inspector Thompson, I've spent 40 years building my business reputation on patience and persistence. I'm prepared for whatever timeline justice requires." He walked me to the elevator, promising regular updates on the investigation's progress. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished metal, a man who just weaponized the federal government against his own son. The building's lobby bustled with afternoon activity as I signed out at security. Government employees hurried past with folders and briefcases, conducting the business of justice in their methodical institutional way. Inspector Thompson called my office at 2:00 Friday afternoon. "Mr. Harris, we're executing the warrant in approximately 2 hours. Thought you'd want to know." I thanked him and hung up, then walked to my window overlooking Wall Street's afternoon activity. David would be in his Soho office, probably meeting with clients, completely unaware that his professional world was about to implode. The clock on my desk read 4:15 when my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Drummond. "Robert, there are federal agents at David's office. Thought you should know." I poured myself coffee and waited. At Harris Media Solutions, according to later reports, the raid began during David's presentation to a celebrity client. 6 IRS agents entered through the reception area with warrants and badges, transforming his trendy converted warehouse into a federal crime scene within minutes. Agent Sarah Chen led the operation with bureaucratic efficiency, directing her team to specific computers and filing cabinets while David stood frozen beside his conference table. His client, a Broadway actor whose political campaign David managed, gathered his materials and left without explanation. "This is completely unnecessary," David told the agents as they photographed documents and seized hard drives. "I can provide whatever information you need voluntarily. Sir, please step aside while we complete our evidence collection," Chen replied, boxing client files with methodical precision. David's 12 employees watched from their cubicles as federal agents dismantled 3 years of business operations. Phone calls stopped mid-sentence. Creative brainstorming sessions dissolved into confused whispers. By 5:30, the agency resembled a corporate archaeological dig rather than Manhattan's most innovative PR firm. My phone finally rang at 6:00. "You orchestrated this." David's voice was raw with fury and exhaustion. "Somehow you arranged this raid. Federal investigations operate independently, David. I don't control government agencies. The timing is too convenient. First my credit disappears, now this. Perhaps you should have considered consequences before betraying family trust. They won't find anything illegal." I let the silence stretch between us, listening to his ragged breathing. Through my office window, Manhattan's lights were beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. "Actually, David, they'll find exactly what I discovered. The question is whether you prefer criminal prosecution or professional bankruptcy. This isn't over. You're absolutely right. It isn't. The line went dead and I sat back in my chair, satisfied with the day's progress. Phase 3 was complete. Tomorrow would bring the weekend, giving David time to fully appreciate his new reality. Monday would introduce him to the final lesson about family loyalty and its consequences. David's desperation brought him to my apartment Saturday evening. Emily trailing behind with the defeated posture of someone who'd spent the day listening to her husband's increasingly frantic phone calls. I opened the door to find them both disheveled. David's usually perfect hair unkempt. Emily's designer clothes wrinkled from a day of crisis management. Their faces showed the strain of 48 hours spent watching his business empire crumble. "We need to talk." David pushed past me into the living room without invitation, Emily following with an apologetic glance in my direction. "Please sit down." I gestured to the sofa where David had spent countless childhood Sundays back when he'd believed his father could solve any problem. "Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Wine? Cut the hospitality act." David snapped, pacing beside the fireplace where his graduation photos still hung. "You know why we're here." Emily positioned herself carefully between us, her journalist instincts recognizing dangerous territory. "Mr. Harris, surely we can resolve this situation as adults, as family." "Family." I repeated the word thoughtfully, settling into my leather chair. "That's precisely what we need to discuss." From my side table, I retrieved the envelope containing the check fragments and placed it on the coffee table between us. Emily's eyes widened as she recognized the scattered pieces. "This was David's wedding present," I explained calmly. $1 million that I destroyed after discovering his betrayal. "Dad, please." David stopped pacing, his voice cracking slightly. "I can fix this. The agency is salvageable if I can just restore the credit line." "Why would I help someone who considers me an embarrassment?" Emily leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly. "There must have been a misunderstanding about the wedding invitations. People make mistakes when they're stressed." "No mistake." I met her eyes directly. "Your husband spent weeks crafting lies to exclude me from his special day. He told my own business associates that I was inappropriate for the occasion." David collapsed onto the sofa, his earlier bravado evaporating. "The wedding planning got complicated. Emily's family had opinions about guest lists." "Stop lying to me." The sharpness in my voice cut through his excuses. And for a moment, we stared at each other across the ruins of our relationship. Emily looked between us uncertainly, finally understanding that this conflict ran deeper than wounded pride. "What do you want?" David's question came out as a whisper. "I want you to experience consequences. For 40 years, I've protected you from failure, provided opportunities, guaranteed your success." I stood and walked to the window, looking out at Central Park, where families still gathered for weekend activities. "You decided that protection was worthless. Now you'll discover what life looks like without it. I'll destroy your reputation if you don't stop this." I turned back to face him, and something in my expression made him shrink against the sofa cushions. "Try me." Monday morning began with phone calls to journalists I'd cultivated over 4 decades of New York real estate development. Sarah Martinez at the Times, Frank Weber at the Post, Jennifer Chong from Business Week. Each received identical manila envelopes containing David's financial records and a timeline of his tax evasion scheme. "Sarah, I have an exclusive story about corruption in the PR industry," I told the Times reporter, who'd covered my major development projects since the 90s. "What kind of corruption?" "Tax fraud, offshore accounts, celebrity client money laundering, the works." By noon, David's phone was ringing with interview requests he couldn't dodge. By 2:00, the first online stories appeared with headlines like "Manhattan PR Agency under federal investigation" and "Celebrity publicist accused of $1 million tax scheme." I watched the news cycle accelerate from my office, monitoring social media as David's professional reputation disintegrated in real time. His agency's Instagram account, once filled with glamorous client events, now attracted comments from reporters seeking statements about criminal allegations. The Broadway actor who had witnessed Friday's raid issued a public statement through his manager. "We are immediately terminating our relationship with Harris Media Solutions, pending resolution of these serious allegations." Two political candidates followed within hours. At 4:00, David called me directly. "Congratulations." His voice carried exhaustion rather than anger now. "You've accomplished what you wanted, have I?" "What exactly did I want, David? To ruin my life completely?" "No, I wanted my son to understand that actions carry consequences. That family loyalty matters, that betrayal has a price." I leaned back in my chair, watching Wall Street's late-day activity through my window. "You taught me that lesson when you excluded me from your wedding." I simply returned the favor. "The agency is finished. My staff cleared out this morning. My reputation is destroyed." "Then you'll have plenty of time to think about what you lost when you decided I wasn't worthy of your important day." Silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of 40 years of relationship damage that couldn't be undone with apologies or explanations. "Will you ever forgive me?" I considered the question carefully, looking at Linda's photograph on my desk. She would have found another way, would have built bridges instead of destroying them. But Linda wasn't here to see her son dismiss everything we'd built together. "David, forgiveness requires remorse for actual wrongs, not regret about consequences. When you understand the difference, call me again." I hung up and opened the evening edition of the Times, where David's downfall occupied 3 columns on the business page. The photograph showed him leaving his former office building, briefcase in hand, looking exactly like what he'd become, a fallen executive, learning that independence without integrity carried its own punishment. Outside my window, Manhattan pulsed with its eternal rhythm of ambition and consequence, success and failure. 40 years of building my empire had taught me that both outcomes required careful planning and flawless execution. I just provided my son with a master class in both. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.